than the other. Okay. So the first one is an educated and motivated workforce. Number 2, peace and security. Number 3, food security. Number 4, the elimination of corruption, and that is business and institutional. Number 5, advanced infrastructure and communications. 6, a healthy population. And 7, sustainable finance. Now, education is very important, and there are lots of studies out there that will link education to GDP growth. Countries with high literacy rates tend to do better. And also, high-end education will attract higher value manufacturing investments, which means more wealth and growth. But from the perspective of ESG and inclusivity, this means providing opportunities to people of all ages to make, providing opportunities to people of all ages to be able to make strategic decisions about their livelihoods and choices. And at the core of ESG is people. Thus, the decision of companies and investors to invest in education is critical. So a lot of times when we talk about education, this is one of the things that gets left behind. A quality education for all also is about access to education. So when it comes to businesses and investment, this is something that needs to be considered. I mentioned peace and security. So how do we get that? And we get that by building a harmonious society with equity for all stakeholders. This is linked to good governance both by the public and the private sector working together. So what is the role of ESG? Well, education is also part of it, but you also need livelihoods and jobs. And so for the ESG angle, companies must be careful that their activities do not have an adverse effect on the communities that they operate. And this one is, of course, a tricky one. In some areas is even difficult to avoid. Last week, there was the Maiden Blue Economy Summit, and a lot of the issues were touched upon. Plastic was a very, very big one. Plastic choking up the communities, plastic choking up our waterways, and even our pipelines have struggled with the plastic issue. One particular area that I thought was very interesting was offshore oil companies. And a lot of times, offshore oil companies' interests clash with those of fishing communities. Already we had an example of the fishermen struggling as they go out to sea and they have to deal with the plastic menace. Now we also have issues with offshore drilling and a clash with fishermen who tend to operate in those areas. And so it was also revealed during the conference that this is something that many countries, even in the global north, struggle with. So when it comes to ESG, we have to look at the impact that we have on the community and how that might deprive other industries of livelihoods. So, for example, when we look at the Gulf of Guinea, most of the pirate attacks that happen in the waters there come from poor fishing villages on the coasts, which raises many questions. And of course, these examples on the far end of the spectrum, but they do demonstrate what happens when these things are not taken seriously. Of course, another obvious example is Galamsey. The devastation caused to the water bodies that millions depend on is not a recipe for peace. And in fact, there are indicators that suggest that if things are not taken care, it could lead to violence. Another example is the use of child labor. And of course, this is against the UN Global Compact Principle number 5, which is against child labor. So these are things that companies should be mindful of. So that means that not just you as a corporate entity, but also looking at your supply chain to make sure that we do not have the use of child labor. Children should be in school where we are educating and equipping them and enhancing their minds to be able to solve the problems of the future and even some of our problems today. Children, we need to support them and they should not be exploited. So then I also mentioned food security. Food security is a key area of importance because of the ability of a nation to feed itself and provide for one of the most basic pillars of national stability. For companies in the food sector, adopting ESG practices will lead to sustainable growth. For example, in the seafood sector, it will ensure that practices are maintained for sustainable fishing and extracting of marine resources responsibly, while also ensuring fishing stocks are properly managed and not abused. On land, it will ensure proper management standards to ensure high quality produce with minimal impact on the environment, and will produce a sustainable bounty for the people. So when we talk about ESG linked, we're also talking about the supply chain. The supply chain, not just for the phytosanitation and sanitary standards, but also the entire value chain, and also the workforce. So when we look at agriculture, we're also talking about your workforce as well. We need to have diversity. We need to make sure we have inclusivity when it comes to those who are working in the farming areas, support to the farming areas. All that must be considered. And of course, a byproduct of food security is a healthier population, which means a more vibrant workforce. So even when it comes to a healthy population, as one of the things that I mentioned, a lot of times there have been cases where, especially when it comes to lower skilled workers, there's a lot of abuse that takes place. Workers are exploited, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to talk about this, but I think it's something we have to take seriously. We cannot expect to be working our people 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, and think that our company is going to grow sustainably. We can't have situations where we don't have even a recourse for labor to even address some of these issues and think that we're going to be applying the ESG principles. So those are things we need to be mindful of. A healthy workforce also includes a workforce that is treated very well, and which is why part of our principles, labor, is very important. Then elimination of corruption is absolutely necessary, and yet it is the most difficult to combat. In Africa, corruption costs businesses on the continent $3 trillion annually. It's a vice that must be eliminated. It's why it's part of our 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. Now, corruption has been defined in several ways, but in the context of this conversation, I will give my own definition for corruption. I will define it as distorting the system for personal or coalitional financial gain at the expense of others in the system. While one group or person is benefiting, others are losing. A business can be struggling at one end of the supply chain because at the other end, someone has taken away their opportunities, but it may not be visible upon closer inspection. And that's why I believe a country like Botswana is where there is today, because this was not a major problem for them. Probably one of under the top 100th countries when it comes to development upon independence. But because they did not have a major corruption issue, they were able to rapidly develop. So this is something that must be taken into consideration. Now, with regards to advances in infrastructure and communication, it is quite clear how this would benefit a nation. Better roads and highways and other transportation systems means faster delivery of goods and services. Telecommunications is vital in a century where online business can provide avenues for people on a scale never seen before in previous centuries. The internet provides access to communities with an unlimited amount of information that they can exploit for their advantage. Most importantly, it is a key tool in ensuring inclusivity for minority groups, granting financial access to SMEs and micro businesses. An ESG framework will help companies utilize communications responsibly and sustainably. Communication companies with an ESG-linked strategy and vision can harness their business models to provide these services which contributes to sustainable business. And that's why you might have been hearing that there's a sudden push to provide free internet to people. I think Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook had that vision. I think at Apple, people have also talking about it, because what they realize is that it's an opportunity to not just grow their own business models, but also enhance and empower communities to also gain knowledge that they can benefit themselves with. So that's also important. Now, the last thing I mentioned was sustainable finance. And sustainable finance is the engine of the engine for sustainability of a nation. Financial institutions should play a guiding role with the private sector, investing in ESG-linked projects. And as Abena mentioned, there is the sustainable banking principles, in which he said that banks are now looking to see if ESG is part of the business model of a business. And I also like what she said when she said a lot of SMEs and small business have this idea or notion that ESG is too big for them. It may require investments. You might have to hire a sustainability manager and this and this and that. But at the Global Compact, and I'm sure it's like this everywhere, when we look at ESG, we're looking at taking those small baby steps towards making a change. Even as a small business, you can you have diversity in your workplace. Even as a small business, you can say, okay, I'm going to treat my labor well. I'm going to pay them a fair wage. I can have gender balance. I can pay equal pay for equal work for gender. Even as a small business, you can ensure that the products that you use are sustainable. The services that you provide are sustainable in small, small ways. And actually, where we are now than we were 10, 15 years ago, there are so many businesses out there that are specializing in providing these type of solutions to assist small businesses. So in the world that we are moving, the possibilities are there for all. But sustainable finance is very important because there is a large movement now of financiers all over the world looking particularly on sustainable finance. In Ghana, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars. There's the green finance bond, which is about $200 million, where companies can get financing to have projects to help their companies go green in several areas. And then globally, the UN Global Compact has the CFO Action Platform, which is a platform that enables CFOs to come together to discuss strategies on investing on sustainable finance. So globally, the movement is there, and locally, we have something as well. Okay. So in conclusion, ESG is an important framework not just for companies to eliminate risks from their operations, nor as a guideline just to align with regulatory requirements, but it is also an opportunity for the private sector to spearhead development in a sustainable way within the vision of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the aspirations of the people. So definitely, you can talk to me, you can talk to Abena and others who are here if you're a company looking to start your journey for sustainability, how to get going and how to start. But what I would like to leave you with is that if you apply these principles, you apply the principle of the Global Compact, you apply the ESG, you will get the nutrients for your company to be strong, healthy, and sustainable into the future. Thank you for your attention.
Please keep that hand going for Tolu. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive speech on spearheading development in a sustainable way in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So now we've come to a very important part of today's program, which is the panel discussion. But before I invite the moderator who will further invite our speakers on this panel discussion, there are two videos we would like you to watch, which are core to ESG. And sometimes pictures are the best ways of telling a story. So please turn to the screen and we will have that. Thank you. right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and your time, and I hope it was insightful as well. So, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's panel discussion. He is a senior manager at KPMG Ghana, and he is at the heart of our ESG team as well. With a round of applause, please welcome Gordon Dade.
I just want to tell you something that my dad told me. Growing up, I always thought that my dad was a very wise person, and he was, and I'm sure yours too. But I also realized that many of us seem to, as I tell my friends what my dad told me, it appears their dad also told them the same thing. So I asked myself, do our dads go to the same school or converge somewhere and agree? So one thing he told me was that you can never drink enough water to prepare for the Hamatan. And then another time he said, if you never travel to another person's house, you always think your mother's food is the best meal. I'm sure your dad, your mom told you the same thing. So I just keep wondering, did they go to the same school? Where they learn all this? But I'm happy that we are all here today to have the discussion. Put your hands together for yourself once again. Today we are privileged to have in our midst very important personalities in the area of ESG. And we are going to learn a lot from them. But when Abna was speaking, I was very happy to hear that the GSE, when you look at it, is actually ESG. And I asked myself, how do we ensure that all of us have some ESG in our DNA or in whatever we do? I'm happy to see that even KPMG, the G itself is ESG. And so if you're a company here and you don't have G somewhere, you must make sure that the ESG goes through your DNA as a company. Then, whilst Tolu was also speaking, he also said ESG, the E is the egg, the G is, the S is salad, and the G is the grapes. So it means that even for him, whatever he eats every day is ESG. Put your hands together for Tolu. So I'm sure very soon we'll start having children that will have ESG in their names. ESG Kwabna, ESG Kofi. Now, to help me with